I'm Mike Anderson, current director of the Rotman Institute, one of the main sponsors of this event, along with the Department of Philosophy at Western, and of course the London Library. And we'd like initially to thank everyone for putting on this event for years now. Thank you all for coming out on a drizzly Thursday evening. As a reminder, this event happens every year, every Thursday in October at 7 o'clock here in one of the rooms in this building. So hopefully you'll be back for, we've got 4 on artificial intelligence writ large. So hopefully you'll come back for another installment this month or next year or all the years. So in emphasizing this theme, we decided not to have Luke here in person, but to create an animation of Luke using ChatGPT. And so that's what we'll be seeing in a few minutes. Now, Luke, or at least the facsimile of Luke that I discussed this with, told me I could say anything I wanted for his introduction, which seemed like a lot of dangerous freedom. But I'll stick with the basics here. So Luke is a assistant professor in the Faculty of Information and Media Studies at Western. You may have heard of us. We're just up the road there. And this year, he's also the inaugural scholar in residence at the University of Toronto's Schwartz Reisman Institute for Technology and Society. His current book project, called Reordering Emotion, Histories of the Computing and Human Feeling from Cybernetics to Artificial Intelligence, is forthcoming from MIT Press, and offers the very first comprehensive history of that particular subject, of how emotion got treated in cybernetics. So we're looking forward to that coming out. Luke has previously been, interestingly, a postdoctoral researcher in the Fairness, Accountability, Transparency, and Ethics group at Microsoft, and also a postdoctoral fellow in sociology at Dartmouth College. He's also been a fellow and affiliate at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard, and an inaugural fellow for the Center for Technology Society at the University of California at Berkeley. So kind of not a smart guy, but somehow managed to land all these fun positions. His PhD is from NYU, and his undergraduate work was done at a little-known institution called the University of Toronto. So please join me in welcoming the facsimile of Luke Stark as we hear what he has to tell us. A couple of logistical issues. Once his lecture is finished, we'll take seconds in the audience. There's a microphone up here, so we ask you to kind of come up to the front. And we'll go from there. All
right? Thank you so much, Mike. Can folks hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Fabulous. Okay, then I'll proceed in that vein. I wish in some ways I were a facsimile. I'm afraid I'm getting over a case of COVID-19, and so thought it would be unwise to be there in person with all of you. Wear masks and get your boosters. So I'll start with a land acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape, and the Chinanton people, on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796, and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. With this acknowledgement, I ask that we respect the longstanding relationships that Indigenous nations have to this land, and that we also acknowledge historical and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples, including First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, endure in Canada, accepting responsibility as a public institution at Western to contribute towards revealing and correcting miseducation, as well as renewing respectful relationships with Indigenous communities through our teaching, research, and community service. As I said, it's a pleasure to be here, virtually at least. And this talk is some fairly new work, so please bear with me, and I'm really excited to have an audience of broad interest and broad backgrounds to get comments on it. So the talk is titled "Animation and Artificial Intelligence." The subtitle of this talk being "How and Why ChatGPT is and isn't like Mickey Mouse." So right there, we've got Mickey Mouse, we've got ChatGPT, or again, a kind of animation thereof. And you might not, might not associate these two objects with each other, right? One is a old-timey cartoon, and the other is a kind of paragon of contemporary artificial intelligence technology. And so today in the talk, I want to sort of do three things very quickly. Run through for folks in the audience who don't know what ChatGPT is, and then I'm going to talk about how ChatGPT as a technical object, I think, really fits the definition of an animated character, of animation, which is a genre of human creativity that goes long, far beyond AI, but which I think is helpful or useful to help us understand exactly what ChatGPT and these similar AI technologies are, what they can do, what they can't do, and how they relate to people, how people relate to them. So that's number two, and then number three, at the end of the talk, I'll make some vague gestures. So I'll try to have some sort of preliminary ideas about how we can understand animation in the context of AI governance. As many of you have maybe heard, there's a big conversation happening right now about how to govern AI systems, whether they should be banned, whether they should be restricted, how dangerous are they? And so I'm going to touch on all of that in my third section. So what is ChatGPT? Well, ChatGPT is an example of a contemporary artificial intelligence system. When I give talks to the public, I often sort of ask if they can give me an example. The first thing that comes to mind of an AI system, I won't torture you with that, but people often say, science fiction characters like HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey, iRobot with Will Smith, Commander Data. There's a plethora of possible examples. But just to get our definitions and terms on the table, right? Today's artificial intelligence is really in some ways a broad term for when a machine mimics human traits like learning and problem solving. So in some ways, right, artificial intelligence is a kind of a goal. It's a goal that computer scientists have had over many decades, and they've taken different routes to try to get there, some of them more successful or less successful than others. Contemporary artificial intelligence technologies are really grounded in this idea of machine learning. So the construction of computer algorithms that can learn from and make predictions on data and solve problems. And especially, you've got this specific kind of machine learning called deep learning, right, which is a form of machine learning that is modeled on artificial neurons. It kind of takes as its model the nervous system, and what it does is essentially, have a very, very large number of data points in a model that helps it find patterns in the data that we produce. And I want to emphasize here, right, that these forms of artificial intelligence, these deep learning systems, would not work outside of the collection of very large amounts of digital data, right? Data sets so large that traditional data processing applications are inadequate, right? This era of what we would call big data. Okay, so right, this is pretty far from HAL 9000 in some ways, although we're kind of, we're getting there towards HAL 9000. But and so this is sort of how a machine learning model works, right? You get a lot of data. You do various things to clean and prepare and make sure that data is legible, right, to the algorithm. You run that data through a model, through an algorithm, and that model is looking for patterns in the data, right? It doesn't know anything about the data necessarily. It's not intelligent, right? It's not sentient. It's looking for correlations, right? Patterns within data that you can then that it can then sort of give a statistical probability about. And then what you do is you take that tested model and you take some other data from the world and you see if it works on that new data that it hasn't been trained on. And then you iterate. So this is all a little abstract, but in any case, right, this is the point here is that these systems are very sophisticated pattern matching machines, right? They're doing statistical regressions of various kinds, various complications to find patterns in human data. So what is ChatGPT? Well, ChatGPT is actually a chatbot that's built on something called a large language model, or an LLM. And a large language model is essentially a kind of version of what I was just talking about, right? It takes a very large amount of data, and and you put this data into this AI system, and the AI system looks for the correlations or the relationships between sentences and words and phrases. So you'll see this is just a graphic I pulled from the internet, right? What is the data that goes into this large language model? Well, it's articles, blogs, journals, poems, news, posts. Sorry, not pets. Although actually, strangely, the Danish version of large language models have been mostly trained on online forums for people who ride horses, which is an interesting tidbit. But in any case, right? So the large language model takes all of this, millions of pages of text collected from the internet, often collected without consent, but we'll get back into that. And it looks for the relationships between different words and phrases. So if the word love comes up, it'll figure out that I, maybe it frequently comes up, the word I comes before love, and the word you comes after. That's a big simplification. And so using this relatively simple statistical trick, right, a large language model can generate legible text, right? Text that is human readable, that appears to often make sense, right? That is readable and that has some cogency. I want to emphasize, right, that this is a little bit different from ChatGPT. So ChatGPT uses GPT-4, uses this large language model, but it's a chatbot. So it's had some additional training on top of that model to make it interactive and friendly with humans, right? So they've done some work, something called reinforcement learning, to make sure that ChatGPT's responses are kind of polite, and then they've also done a number of things, especially recently, to make sure that it doesn't do things like insult people, or to tell you you should commit suicide, or these sort of problems. So that's a kind of very brief overview of large language models, GPT-4, and then ChatGPT, which is this chatbot, right? This artificial agent that's been built using GPT-4. Okay, so all right, that's all very well, but how then does this ChatGPT, this large language model chatbot, fit the definition of an animated character? Why am I bringing animation into this? I want to give credit to the anthropologist who has, I think, done the most work and the best work for many years on animation as a form of genre. Terry Silvio, her book Puppets, Gods, and Brands: Theorizing the Age of Animation from Taiwan is available at the library. It's very good. Right, and we're not just talking here about cartoons, right? We're talking about animation as a set of human cultural forms that involve the construction of social others. Through our projection of qualities perceived as human, like soul or power or agency, life, intentionality, right, breath, right, outside the self and into the world, into the environment, through acts of creation, perception, and interaction. Okay, right. So when we hear the word animation, yeah, we often would think, cartoons, right? And here's everybody's favorite, all of our favorite cartoons are animated characters, all in one place. But I want to break down that definition to just give you a little bit more context about why this broader definition of animation is interesting and important. So we have this idea of the construction of social others, right? And what does that mean? Well, that means that, right, humans are extremely good at finding social beings and interactions where they maybe don't exist, and making them up, right? So my favorite example of this is Wilson, the volleyball. I don't know how many people in the audience saw the Tom Hanks film Castaway, now some years ago, right? Well, poor Tom Hanks, stuck on a deserted island. What does he do? He puts a face on this volleyball that washes ashore with him in his own handprint, and Wilson, the volleyball, is his only companion. Gets him through this ordeal, right? He's created this social other to help him survive. Humans are social creatures. And how do they do that? Well, they project outside the self, right? And so this is also really important that animation has as much to do with the individual doing the projecting as it does the thing upon which the projection is taking place on. And I have a great example that I don't know if it's going to work. It's a video. I'm going to try this. Can you hear that?
Oh, we cannot hear that.
So I don't know if people could hear that, or sorry, maybe it's not very clear. But just to recap, right? So the guy at the end, after we've seen this pathos filled shot of this milk creamer being thrown on the floor, says, "Oh, tacky, why do you feel sad for this mocha milk? Or tacky items can be replaced at IKEA." Right. And so the point here, right, is that this is like all about the projection of agency through emotion into this other object. And I, of course, in this case, that's being made fun of because IKEA doesn't want you to do that. IKEA wants you to go buy more stuff. Then we have this idea about qualities perceived as human, and I've already given you sort of a list of some of the qualities we're talking about, but I just want to pause here and note the complexity of the question of the human here, right? Because of course, one of the important sets of relationships we have as humans that we do produce some projection onto are pets, right? And so there's an interesting set of questions about where animated characters, how they relate in our minds to pets, right? Often animated characters are designed to look like pets or animals. So I just wanted to flag that. And then finally, right, animation can come in a wide variety of genres, styles, and forms, right? Through acts of creation, perception, and interaction. So it's not just creating; it's also like Wilson in the volleyball. It's also how we perform, how we act with an animated character. Okay, so let me give you some examples of animated genres or animated forms, right? We've already talked about cartoons. Here are some Japanese cartoons or manga characters to balance out the American ones earlier. But of course, there are different forms of animation, right? There's claymation, stop motion animation, and then of course there are also elements of animation that we might not think of as animated, but are in fact excellent examples of this. So puppetry, right? Puppetry is an extremely important and long-standing form of human animation. You've got, like, for instance, this puppet, right, where a number of people are manipulating one entity, right, to make it to move in tandem to make the dragon dance. Or on the other hand, you have marionettes, right, which one person can manipulate multiple entities, right, and make them interact with each other. There are other examples of animated characters that are relevant to the history of artificial life or artificial intelligence. One is the 18th century trend of creating automata, right? Clockwork dolls or clockwork machines that perform some action, some animated forms, to entertain people at court in European monarchies. This is The Writer by a craftsman named Jacques Rose. But then coming to the present, right, we could even think of things like action figures or children's toys as being, genres where that can be animated by your children, right? And then when we come into digital technologies and social media, we see, of course, animation is everywhere and increasingly so. Everything from emoji and animated GIFs, to, and I'll come back to this later, to animated characters like Apple's Animoji and Memoji that are built on the facial recognition technologies within smartphones. Incredibly popular are skins, these or filters, on social media apps like TikTok and WhatsApp and Facebook, right? Where some animated mask is put over your face. And we could even think about those virtual pets again, Tamagotchi, from 30 years ago as another genre of animated form. Okay, so I think hopefully this has given you a good idea of the variety and range of animated characters or animated genres. So now I want us to narrow in a little bit on contemporary kind of artificial intelligence and robotics, and think about how once we started understanding these technologies as animations, as animated characters, right? It becomes very clear that that's what they are, right? So, a sophisticated humanoid android like Sophia, who's been popular on the kind of conference circuit, right, is an animated character, right? This machine uses various different technologies. It uses, including kind of the natural language processing that you use to build large language models to produce text. It also uses animatronics, right? It's a mix of different technologies that are animating this machine. We have seen an enormous number of kind of animated avatar AI companions. This is from Replica, which is a well-known AI companion service, right? Now, these systems, again, also use, the language technologies I've been mentioning, as well as some animation to produce animated characters that will learn details about your life, will interact with you, and provide some form of companionship. We also have social robots like Pero the Seal, famous a care robot, given to often to elderly people with dementia or with cognitive issues, that has a lot of the kind of animated qualities of a flesh and blood pet, but is a robot. And then finally, we have text chatbots, text-based AI systems that are also animated, right? These are text-based animations. One of the most famous and oldest is Eliza, that was developed by Joseph Weizenbaum, a computer scientist at MIT in the mid-'60s. And Eliza was a very simple program. It was a chatbot that essentially mimicked the style of a Rogerian psychotherapist, who was always asking you questions about the things you were typing in. But even this kind of very simple program was engaging to people. People were projecting their own, projecting into it all sorts of agency and emotion that it did not, in fact, possess. The heirs to these technologies today are technologies like Wobot, which is a company that produces chatbots to help people with cognitive behavioral therapy, kind of mental health questions, and it's a similar principle, right? These systems are built on doing just enough in terms of appropriate linguistic response to draw you in, have you project personality, project emotion onto the technology, right? And that's right, just like ChatGPT. There it is, right? ChatGPT does exactly the same thing, right? It's designed in this kind of first-person format, right? It is, it's very flexible because of this large language model I've already talked about. And like Eliza, like Wobot, right? This is a text-based animation, right? It's asking us to project our own sense of its vitality onto it to make us, to engage us more actively with it. Okay, so there are several qualities of animation as a genre, a broad set of genres that are consistent across them, and I think I want to focus on three interesting ones because they tell us something about the way that ChatGPT and other other animated AI technologies work. Right. One of them is that the mechanism of agency, right, for animated characters depends on many people coming together to imbue a single agent with life or vitality. Or maybe sometimes it's the opposite. You need one person to imbue many agents, right? Think back to that Chinese dragon puppet, right? That needs 5 or 6 people to imbue this animated character with life, with agency. And so these performing objects provide an illusion of life, but they push the living labor of the people doing the animating into the background or off stage, right? I think this is really critical. And we can see several ways in which ChatGPT does this. Right. One of them, of course, is the fact that ChatGPT as a large language model is trained on the written text of millions of people, including possibly you or I. Right. There's a system where you can look and see whether your book has been used to train the model, and lots of people have done this and found their books involved. Right. But this is an animated technology. So it's animated by the work of many thousands of writers, right, who are not being paid for their labor. Right. It's in some ways it's an interesting way of kind of using this kind of dead labor, reanimating it, to make OpenAI money. And of course, this has been a big concern for many artists and illustrators. This is true for ChatGPT in writing. It's also true for similar generative AI systems that do images, right, like Midjourney or other. The other point about ChatGPT as bringing together the labor of many people to make it work is we're not just talking about the writing of many people over that the system has been trained on. We're also talking about a lot of workers who have been hired to make sure the system doesn't produce racist text, misogynist text, or other problematic outputs. Right. These workers are often very low paid. They're often in the global south or in parts of the world, right, where pay scale is much lower, where worker protections are much less. In this case, this is Kenya. A lot of the training from ChatGPT was done in Kenya. And so, so these are also laborers that often get forgotten in the context of this animated character, right? They're responsible for the way it interacts, but they don't get a lot of credit. Okay, so that's one problem. We have a labor question of who is doing the animating and who is making money off of it and getting credit for it. We also have a kind of conceptual or structural question around animation itself. Part of what makes animation is that it simplifies, right? It's dependent on the human ability to make projective inference into it. It's schematic, right? I mean, if we wanted the real thing, we would go look at the real thing. But the fact that we make these projective inferences onto animated characters and are encouraged to do so can often be problematic. And nowhere is that clearer in the context of representations of race and racial categories in animation, right? So if you think about how representations of humans work online, right, it's all about kind of quantifying the shape of the head and the distance between the eyes. Like, this is from a patent from one of the social media platforms that sort of points that you can move the eyes around. And so you end up having this this kind of stereotyped or kind of menu driven, to use the words of Lisa Nakamura, understanding of how representation works, right? And of course we want to have representation in animation, but the problem here, right, is that the menu is being set by the design itself and by the company that's producing the design. And so you're not going to get the kind of full diversity of maybe what people would like through these schematizations, right? And what that also means, right, is that animation is a very potent place where we project our own biases and our own stereotypes onto, right? It's a really this has been true for many decades in things like video games and TV. The example I'll give you, again, all my cultural references are very dated, but from 20 years ago, right, the first Star Wars prequel, you had a lot of concerns and complaints about this character Jar Jar Binks, because Jar Jar Binks seemed like was speaking in a kind of stereotypical patois, kind of a stereotypical Caribbean accent. And there was a kind of a lot of kind of consternation, like, why is this alien speaking in this way that locates him within this racial hierarchy on Earth? So there's a lot of projection going on with animation, and a lot of that projection happens because of emotional response, right? So animations are extremely good at eliciting powerful emotional human responses. They're designed to be, right? That's the whole point of an animation, is to give you just enough to project, as I said, project intentionality and life onto the animated character. Right, this is and there are many examples. There have been examples with ChatGPT and similar kind of large language models. A few years, weeks, months ago, whenever it was, there was a notable article in the Times where the Times technology columnist, New York Times, Kevin Roose, had a very unsettling conversation with one of these chatbots. And the chatbot tried to convince him to leave his wife, told him that the chatbot loved him, and said all sorts of other things. And this was taken as kind of an example of how sophisticated and almost how sentient these technologies were. When in fact, it's what it was a kind of projection of the technology columnist onto the kind of the things that this system was saying. And we've seen other examples of this. There is a famous example of people who are very attached to these animated avatar characters that are powered by AI. This is one from Japan, but there are other examples in the United States. And these are all examples of what has been termed the Eliza effect, right? Named after that first chatbot that I mentioned from the 60s, right? It's when you attribute human level intelligence and understanding to an AI system precisely because you're projecting your own, you're projecting emotional competence and you're projecting your own emotions onto the system. And this is true. Look, this is true. We see this in examples not just on for chatbots for creation, but also chatbots in other contexts. Right? This is a nursing chatbot. These kind of virtual agents are increasingly popular in areas like healthcare and mental health because they supposedly promise right to provide interaction without having to actually pay a human worker. Okay, so how can we understand ChatGPT as animation, or how can understanding ChatGPT as animation inform how we govern or regulate or think about other AI technologies? All right, so the first thing I want to say, and I don't know if I need to say this to this group, but I feel like it needed to be said several months ago, right? ChatGPT is animated; it's neither sentient nor intelligent, right? And so understanding ChatGPT as an animated character gives us a very clear, well-articulated way of understanding, what ChatGPT does and what it doesn't do, right? The claim that ChatGPT and similar technologies deserve recognition as persons or they have some sort of rights makes as much sense as doing the same for a Disney movie or a Tamagotchi, right? These are animated characters, and we don't tend to think that Mickey Mouse, in many ways, is a person like you or I. But I mean, people still bring up. This is a tweet from the other day. People still articulate the way that LLMs work in language that assumes, kind of humanizing language that it makes them equivalent to human brains. This person is saying that they can hallucinate and lie, and that's completely ridiculous, right? This is not the case. Okay, but we really do desperately need ways to regulate and govern, or at least think about regulating and governing these animated AI technologies because they're everywhere and they are increasingly wreaking havoc. And I'm going to go through what's called the parade of horribles, which is a whole bunch of examples of the way these things are being used today, going from maybe most innocuous to least innocuous, right? So in a very innocuous way, right, we've got the use of generative AI systems to produce little animated stickers that subvert, copyright in lots of different ways and produce images like Luigi with a rifle that maybe Nintendo wouldn't want to see. You have the question of what happens when your AI voice chatbot is discontinued or gotten rid of, which does have emotional effects on the people who have engaged with it. You have labor questions, labor problems, right? So one of the big issues with the SAG-AFTRA strike right now, why it hasn't been settled in the United States yet, is the concern on the part of actors that animated versions of themselves, high fidelity animated versions of themselves, will be used in movies to put them out of work, to extend their branding. And potentially to create all sorts of quote unquote Frankenstein like simulacra, right? Then you have, this is an old example, but a good one, right? The problem that these chatbots, because they are being trained on data from the real world, can very quickly go amok, right? This is a chatbot that Microsoft developed now a few years ago that became extremely racist because it was being trained on the things that people were saying on Twitter. And then you get into some really dark places, right? You've got the question of creating virtual entities so that you can deliberately abuse them, right? The ability to indulge in kind of antisocial or anti kind of anti-human behavior with an AI. Much in the same way that we have similar problems with the creation of animated characters, so-called deepfakes, using the faces of ordinary people in sexual acts, right? Using the faces of politicians to say produce misinformation. Kind of culminating in a story that there's probably more to this than the headline suggests, right? But that sometimes the way these systems interact can indeed have life or death consequences. And so I want to flag, right, that there are existing legal and regulatory frameworks that we can think about and point to, but they're necessary, but they're not sufficient. What are these legal and regulatory frameworks? Well, they're kind of boring ones because if we're talking about animated characters, we're really talking here about intellectual property law a lot of the time, right? We're talking about copyright, trademark, product liability, right? If your animated character is on the fritz, you got to fix it. Defamation and false light, potentially, labor law, and then other kinds of labeling and consumer warning systems. These cases are already beginning to play out in the courts, right? You can't copyright one of these generated AI images because there's no one individual who produced it. We might ask how you would account for the generation of images that we now know were animated by the labor of many, many different people. We don't know how to account for that. Are chatbots like ChatGPT even legal, right? Because they have used a very large amount of text that may or may not be in the public domain, right? And have not compensated the people who used that text or developed that text in doing so. And in a sort of a similar space, right? People are suing not ChatGPT, right? But people are suing OpenAI, the company that develops it, for various kind of made up things, slandering their reputations. We can also point to the recent successful conclusion of the writers' strike as an example of actually how labor action is an extremely important way to kind of limit these animated characters, right? The screenwriters didn't totally reject the use of ChatGPT or other similar kind of generative AI models, but what they did do is make sure that the studios couldn't force those models onto the writers to be used, and they also made sure that a writer could decide if they wanted to use a large language model to create a draft, but that the studio couldn't couldn't tell them to do so. And then finally, right, there's various kinds of consumer protection and labeling possibilities. This is a California statute on the unlawful use of bots. Basically, right, it's illegal to pretend that a bot is a person if you are interacting with a California person. And so this might be potentially helpful. But I think, right, none of these tools exactly get to some of the elements of animation that I've mentioned. And none of them, entirely grapple with the kind of projective and emotional and collective realities of an animated character, right? And so I think this is the kind of speculative part of the talk. What other tools can we develop to think about and regulate animated AI systems? I think one thing that's really important, right, is to distinguish between AI-generated animations that are created for quote-unquote passive consumption versus AI-generated or powered animations created explicitly to interact with the public. Now, no consumption is really passive, but the example being, right, that if your an AI generated image, or film, right? You're watching it, you're consuming it like you would consume another other film or other kind of piece of cultural product, right? Whereas a system like ChatGPT, right, is designed explicitly to interact with you, right? It's designed to elicit those emotional projections, and draw you in to kind of projecting life onto it. I also wonder whether we need to think a little bit about iconoclasm, right? Whether representatives, lifelike representations of humans in the context of AI chatbots might be something we would want to restrict, right? What is iconoclasm? Iconoclasm is an act of breaking or destroying idols, and we could think about, for instance, how many of these animations that are grounded on human faces, are really, very tied up with other forms of surveillance technologies like facial recognition, right? You need to find all the points of the face so that you can animate this cute panda bear here, right? And so, this is all pretty preliminary, and I'd be very interested to hear what people think about it. But I guess my core question here is design intended to encourage the projection of qualities perceived as human onto an AI agent ever appropriate, right? Humans are going to project qualities onto all sorts of things: animated objects, inanimate objects, volleyballs, etc. The question for me is whether animated AI systems should be regulated in how much they try to draw that projection out and onto themselves. An interesting example, right, of this kind of the kind of way you would design a robot without physical signs of humanness, right? This is from Interstellar from a few years ago. It's these robots are not humanoid at all; they're big black blocks of cubes. But in fact, these don't quite fit what I'm thinking about because they have extremely human voices. Yeah, so I'll leave you with this question: is design intended to encourage the projection of qualities perceived as human onto an AI agent ever appropriate? If so, how, when, and under what rules? And is a kind of intentionally iconoclastic design possible? I don't know. I just saw this. This came over my internet. Came across my Twitter screen the other day. I don't know. I'm not sure if psycho scumbag chatbots are all bad or not, but they will, according to the Daily Star, the big-brained wrong-uns will extend our lifespan to 100 and allow us to work a 3-day week if they don't kill us first. So let's hope they don't kill us first. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and attention. I'm sorry I can't be there physically, but I look forward to your questions. I hope most of that came through.
We have time for questions. We move this up. So if people who are asking questions would be so kind as to come up, you can stand or sit here so that our speakers can hear what you're asking about. And, please keep your questions brief to give plenty of opportunity for participation. I know that I'm American, so naturally rude, though I will cut you off if I'm in time. Please. Go ahead.
Luke, can you hear me? How about now?
Oh, yes, I can. I was muted. I can hear you.
Okay. I'm just wondering, I'm imagining like ChatGPT is really easy to engage in. So I was surprised to find people like my mom who doesn't know computers, just yeah, I use it every day. It's super easy. And I'm just wondering how we think about everything you spoke about as this gets even easier. And in fact, it could be as simple as anyone could build one of these at home on any electronic device. I mean, in that case, you can't attribute it to who are you going to sue? You can't sue OpenAI, or you can't have an issue with anyone if anyone can just pick up any computer and just make one of these for whatever purpose they want. So how does that change your perspective at all if it gets to that point, the technology?
Yeah, so the system is always gonna have been trained on some data, right? So um there has been interesting work thinking about smaller language models, right? So like developing language models on more curated data sets or on smaller data sets. So I think that's like I think that the data set will tell you where the data, like it will tell you where the data set is from, right? Like you'll be able to know where it came from. Um, but I think that yeah, I think the incredible the it's the interface design of ChatGPT is why it's been so popular and successful, right? I mean, OpenAI made a deliberate decision to release it to the public, despite all knowing about all of the challenges and problems that we've identified with it over the last 6 to 8 months. And I guess I think that's why we need to to think about how to regulate this kind of thing, right? And I think part of the point here is that disabusing ourselves of the notion that these systems have any kind of sentience or we need to worry about them in terms of any kind of even of free speech, right? Makes it a lot easier because they're products, right? And if your product doesn't work very well in terms of like producing bad data or defamatory content, you can have the slickest interface in the world, but you're still going to have a problem. So I think I'm not sure it's going to be that easy for everybody to build one of these things, but I also think that there's a whole continuum of ways we can say, all right, we can, we already regulate various other kinds of consumer goods, right? We can potentially regulate these as well.
So I'm kind of curious. The thing works on a data set, as you said. So has anyone done any sort of performance comparisons, using the AI model, but using different data sets to see how they react differently?
Right. It's very these. So the data set that OpenAI has collected, this model is extremely large. Um, and there are very few data sets that big. One of the big challenges right now in the context of these technologies, these AI systems, and especially these large language models, is they take an enormous amount of computing power to run. They take an enormous amount of water to cool the computers. This is a whole environmental thing about this. The companies involved have been very cagey about what exactly is in the data sets. There are, Microsoft has one, Google has one, OpenAI has this one. I think maybe Amazon has, so they have these models, but they're huge. So you kind of can't extricate the model and the outputs of the model from the data set itself. If that makes sense. And it's very hard to evaluate these systems from the outside, right? You can ask all sorts of questions and produces various answers, and but it's not, doing evaluation of large language models, especially if you don't have access to the internal code, is hard. It's potentially even hard if you do have access to the internals of the model, because right, these models have trillions of parameters involved, right? It's not always entirely clear why they associate one word with another word. It's hard to do that, which is one of the reasons why I think some folks in computer science have advocated for smaller models that are more directed towards particular tasks, because then you have a better sense of what's going on in them. I hope that answers the question.
Hi, Luke. So AI iconoclasm really reminds me of the Butlerian Jihad from Dune. That seems very similar. But I actually used to work for Scale, the company that contracts out to those Kenyan laborers. And I really appreciated it because it was actually an incredibly dehumanizing and exploitative experience that I feel very ambivalent about, actually, after having been a part of it. But the question I have for you is, something I remember a lot of people talking about at the time was this idea that ChatGPT was going to disrupt information retrieval and, basically make Google obsolete. And the experience that a user has when they're using Google or Bing is really based on a library information metaphor of retrieving documents. Can you talk a little bit about what changes for the user experience when we switch to this more animated paradigm that you've been talking about?
Sure. I think that right. So the first thing to say is as currently constituted or is constituted until very recently, right? So remember, yeah, these large language models are not encyclopedias, right? They have they've been trained on encyclopedias, and so they will sometimes produce information-shaped sentences, to use the memorable term of William Gibson. But no one has vetted those sentences, right? There's no they look like they're from an encyclopedia, but they're not. So that's been a big problem, and that's caused all sorts of issues. But I mean, ChatGPT or OpenAI has recently said, well, look, we can combine web search and with this chatbot interface, which will just make it'll find things on the internet, but it'll provide you with this kind of friendly, this animated set of engagements. So I mean, look, I mean, librarians and information science folks are generally underappreciated, right? I think again, there's a labor question whether we want to believe that a kind of animated character is going to replace the work of a trained information professional. I don't think it is. I think there will be a temptation by a lot of people to assume that, especially people in power, control the purse strings. But I think what will often happen is that for a large number of tasks, you're going to end up getting bogged down into the kind of world of kind of almost good enough, but not quite, and you haven't quite gotten the thing that you want, and it's just going to actually end up taking up the time. I'd be interested to know what people use ChatGPT for. I mean, I know people use ChatGPT for recipes. There's been a big conversation about this in the context of academic, plagiarism and pedagogy that maybe we don't have to go into. But in terms of for me, actually, I'll tell you a useful thing that people use ChatGPT for, to produce language level specific questions if you're a language teacher, right? But to me, there's a fairly high diminishing returns that starts to set in when you actually dig into what these systems are for, right? We can use most of the things people are using them for, they can use through search or through some other mechanism of information retrieval, and it's A, less environmentally costly, and B, isn't potentially being built on the kind of unpaid labor of hundreds of thousands of people. Sorry, that was a little rambly,
Thank
but
you.
Luke, hi, Lisa here, and I hope I can ask this question. I hope I can figure it out. It strikes me that one of the great things about seeing ChatGPT, among other systems, as animation is that people will learn how much it depends on them to imbue something with human qualities. So I wanted to ask you, as a teacher, as a person in the world, what that gesture, training people to recognize how much their sense of the thing actually depends on their unself-conscious insertion of themselves into the thing. What do students, what do we gain from understanding that that's what we're doing? I think we do it with animated characters all the time. We do it with, all kinds of things that draw upon our emotions.
That's right. And I think that we always will, and I there's no problem with it. I think that's why I was trying to make this distinction around the human tendency to do this projection versus the deliberate elicitation of those projections for particular ends, right? That it's not that, of course humans are going to do this, and that's, I mean, it's, look, creativity is all about playing, having your GI Joes and having them do all sorts of things that GI Joe would never do as a kid, right? But I think that maybe as often happens, my concern is the kind of deliberate shaping of that animated experience by companies with a particular interest, right? A particular interest in, in keeping our attention, in extracting data from us, etc. So, I mean, to answer your question, I mean, I think I don't know if students need to be taught how they know how to do it. I think it's maybe just more that they can be aware that this is happening. I don't know. That's not a very helpful answer. But I agree. I mean, I wonder, and I think creativity. I think various forms of creative practice are precisely how you reflect on that kind of projection and interjection. So that's probably a testament for more theater and more art.
I want to make clear that I think animation is a very accomplished idea to get people to recognize that. So it's an appreciation.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for this interesting talk. I just want to ask a question about the question you raised about projecting human qualities on AI. And I'm still not convinced how, or really clear on how that is an issue for the appropriateness of AI. I see two things. Well, one is the thing you already mentioned, kind of we project it on everything. So how can we distinguish certain, different AI bots if anything can be, can have human qualities or we project human qualities in it. And the second thing is that it can actually be very helpful, right? To kind of think that our human qualities to an AI bot makes it easier to use, that you're actually talking to someone or that someone is writing to you. So yeah, if you could maybe say a little bit more about that question. You're muted. I think you're muted.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm trying to keep my coughing off of the mic. I certainly don't disagree. I agree that it's very helpful as a design strategy to elicit the projection of agency into a system. Yeah, absolutely. It works really well. Which is why it's so powerful, and I think requires some reflection, right, and potentially regulation. So just to take an example, I should have the Canadian equivalent top of mind. I don't. That's what happens when you go to do your PhD in the States. But the Federal Trade Commission in the United States, right, one of its core mandates is to flag and disrupt or get rid of unfair and deceptive advertising practices. Right? So we could and they've recently begun to think about the way that the design of websites, the user experience of websites, comes under that purview. So I think if you say, okay, in this particular context, you've got this, maybe I don't know, maybe it's a let's use a perennial favorite, children. Maybe there's a chat bot that's been designed to interact with children in a way that makes them go get their parents' credit card and sign up for XYZ games, right? Is the problem there the chat bot, or is the problem there the kind of persuasiveness of the chat bot? I think that's the kind of question I think we should just be thinking about, right? It's not that humans are always going to do this projection. It's that many designers are deliberately shaping these systems to elicit that kind of engagement for their own purposes. And so the question just is, what are those purposes?
Thanks.
Okay, I've been trying to frame this in my mind, so we'll see if it comes out as anything more than just me talking. I'm interested in the way that AI technology is interactive that other animation might not be. So I'm thinking about examples of even very powerful connections you might have to an animated character. You might see yourself a lot in Lisa Simpson or something and feel very comforted by Lisa Simpson's existence in the world and the stories that are told by her. But there's a way that my opinion of ChatGPT can get back to ChatGPT. And so I was thinking about, you're saying that it's not sentient, but there's a way that it's interactive and that there's a relationship there. And I'm wondering if you feel that way, that there is a relationship between the user and the chatbot that makes it different from other animation, or would you not want to even go that far if you're saying that it's not sentient? Like this is just a tool that has been created.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was on the radio a few months ago talking about sort of some of this stuff with a guy who a really interesting, thoughtful guy who was a Replika user and who was really, spoke very eloquently about the usefulness of Replika to him. He had various kinds of social anxiety. He said, look, I know this isn't the equivalent to a human. I know this is quote unquote isn't real, but it's valuable to me. It helps me. It helps me model conversations. It helps me do all sorts of things. So I'm glad you asked this question, right? I'm by no means denigrating the capacity of the human to project onto and feel big things in relation to these systems, right? In fact, part of the reason why they're as compelling as they are is because they've been designed to elicit those big feelings from people and elicit those complex emotions. My concern is twofold, right? But so sorry to answer your question, right? But that's entirely on you. You as the projector are the one you're animating that relationship, right? My concern is twofold. One concern, right, is again goes back to this point about who the people on the other end, designing these systems to produce animated characters, what their goals are, what their aims are, right? So, for instance, Replika, right, to access certain features, to access certain forms of interactivity for this avatar, you need to pay whatever it is, $8 a month or something, right? So, so there's a profit motive there. So that's my one concern, and then my other concern, is look, I don't want to get into I don't want to be too normative about human sociality and human relationship, because look, we all have all sorts of weird relationships with all sorts of things, and that's fine. But and sometimes shallow relationships are useful and important, right? Like sometimes you don't want to have a really deep relationship with something or someone, but you do want to sometimes have deep relationships with entities that can project back, right? Or that are alive and can challenge you through that response. This gets kind of in communication theory and interaction theory, but so I think this is not to me saying that the kind of projection that we do with these systems is wrong, but it is to say, okay, if we understand these systems as animated objects, we have a much better idea of what's going on, and we can start asking the right kind of questions.
Right. Thank you.
Hi, my question, I guess, is moving forward. I'm not really sure how
like the source of ChatGPT, like how it gets information. So moving forward, and I guess copyright and legal standpoint, it's like how much stuff, like information we put out towards it, into it, and if like you said Microsoft has one, and then like Google has one, and ChatGPT is like an open source thing. Is that how much of our information that we give them is going to remain our? How much data that we give it? Say it's even just creative stuff, and how that's going to, I guess, shape internet moving forward, and how they're going to like govern certain things, and like our corporation going to own a part of our, I guess, like our holding or standard, like in what we in our person, like moving forward. I guess I don't really know how to explain this properly. I'll be honest, but it's like wondering how like our data that we're giving to these programs is going to be managed, and like how that's going to I guess be governed by in a legal standpoint, and how that's going to shape things moving forward.
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is that it's all very unclear right now, right? Because this model ChatGPT has been live for less than a year. So it's not clear. It's not totally clear. Like so one thing that some websites have done is shut off the ability of a company like OpenAI to scrape their text. So Reddit, for instance, right? Reddit, lots of people talking, chatting away on Reddit, right? They have instituted, excuse me, new policies in the last 6 months, right? Where that if you want to use that text data, you have to pay Reddit, right? You can't just go through and do it open source, right? Some of these other models, like DALL-E, which is one of these image generation models, now have an ability. You can go in you have to go in as an artist and like specifically ask for your work to be removed from the model, right? Which is kind of like, okay, fine. That's post facto, like after the fact, like going in and complaining about something is never a particularly good way to like solve these issues, right? So it's this is a big question, and then a bunch of big companies like Getty Images, right, have gone and sued or are pursuing various forms of legal action against OpenAI, claiming that these models have been trained on all these images without permission, without consent, and without payment. So it's not. I mean, right? This is the kind of weird thing about this is that you and I and many people in the room, right? Our effort, our labor, our creativity has, in a small way, gone into the animation of these systems, which in a different economic climate, you could see this as, or a different economic system, you could see this as being kind of, oh, amazing, like this is a product of humanity, blah, blah. But of course, right, the way the economics are set up now, it's essentially just like, this is like labor that is being repurposed for the profit of one big company. So that's why I think the labor stuff is so important, right? Because how people's data gets used to train AI models is going to be a central question to every labor conversation for the next 20 years, 30 years. That's all I got. Sorry, I don't have a better example, a better answer.
One last question. Can you think of any risks of enacting regulations that are maybe not so nuanced? So some government somewhere says, hey, we're going to do some regulation on AI, but then there's like some interpretation of it that maybe expands to consider it like everything is animation, just like you said, and now this regulation comes out and it's so broad that it now applies to many things and maybe causes some unintended harms. Can you think of any risks to regulating these things?
Yeah, look, bad regulation is bad regulation. I mean, look, there are many very heavily regulated industries. Banking is a good example, right? Where there's extremely tight regulation, and yet, what I would consider bad social outcomes happen, right? So the devil is in the details. There's always like bad regulation is bad regulation. There is definitely a big concern. I think this is a fair concern that often the way regulation is being promulgated around AI these days it will essentially advantage big incumbent players like Microsoft or OpenAI and disadvantage smaller companies, right? So like the more like legal compliance stuff you have to do, the more that's going to benefit very large companies with very large legal departments as opposed to small startups. So that's a real problem. I'm not, this is why we have public policy schools and law schools and it's a big topic to work through. But I think that like any other I think if we understand these technologies as another technology that is not neither sentient nor magical, right? And we can understand what it is in terms of these animated characters, that puts us more in the ballpark of how to respond appropriately.
So unless there are more burning questions, I'm noticing poor Luke coughing quite a bit more often than he was at the beginning of this talk. No, we appreciate you coming, given you're still under the weather. So thank you, and let's thank Luke.
Thanks, folks. Sorry I can't be there in person, but this was easier for me, so I appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for making time for us. Next week, same time, next Thursday, October 12th, another talk on ChatGPT and other generative AI systems. If you're really just from Catherine Stinson, who's a former postdoc here at Western. You give a great talk, so hopefully you'll come back and hear more.
Great scholar. Highly recommend her talk. You should definitely go.